Leave it to the Russians to understand and describe this. They have twice as many scientists as we do. So we need anti-gravity. There are leptons or ether everywhere in the universe. If a device will be invented which will be able to change leptons' direction to the necessary one, creating ether wind, our task will be solved, the anti-gravity task. We already have such a device. This is our cell. Our cell? We only have one cell. A cell of the conic or cuneiform kind takes up a lepton stream from the horizontal direction. It will become obvious after we read Wilhelm Reich's works in the attachment and reapportion it to the vertical one. A small part of the stream goes in one direction, while almost the whole stream goes in another. Of course, if the cell's axis is placed vertically, as in Grebennikov's platform, well, I'm not sure how he made this thing fly, but I'm dying to ride one. I don't really care how it works, honestly. I just want a hoverboard. I want to go 1,000 miles an hour and go anywhere I want without paying $4 a gallon for gasoline. Now, if we place such a solid net consisting of the microcells under the platform and a zone between the bodies, that is, between the earth and the platform, with a man, and orient it in such a way that ether wind, which is created by it, blows the platform from the bottom, compensating insufficiently of lepton pressure as described above, the platform and its passenger will become imponderable and fly up. Ooh, that sounds good. Let's get started. How come this guy didn't build one if he understands it? Controlling a power of an ether stream and its directions, the blinds are used for this. We have the same rough material idea of force vector as in the case of jet streams. Ooh, wow, imagine that. So it's like riding in a jet stream. That's why the hair is not messed up. If you're riding in a jet stream that's traveling 600 miles an hour, you're doing 0 miles per hour compared to that stream if you're at 600 miles an hour also. That's why. But why is it invisible? What forces the light waves to go around this vehicle? And then he continues, the only difference is that ether is so insensible for us that there are no strong air streams. Well, that's what I just said. It doesn't mess up his hair because there are no strong air streams. At first sight, there is nothing. The platform just picks up speed and height without any sound, visual, and other effects. Inertia force doesn't influence a pilot. So he loses his inertia. His mass goes to 0. When gravity goes to 0, mass goes to 0. How could that be? It's not true in space. You can have 0 gravity and still have mass. And it's hard to change directions. If anything fired in space will continue in that direction forever at the same speed unless acted upon by an outside force. Continuing, it is necessary to note that a head is heavier than legs, while the legs in turn are heavier than the platform. Hold on a minute. It is necessary to note that a head is heavier than legs. So if you're closer to the source, you're lighter. What's closest to the source? The platform. What's next closest? The legs, and the head is farthest. So 20 feet above your head, there's gravity again? Is that the idea? It is necessary to note that a head is heavier than the legs, while the legs, in their turn, are heavier than the platform. It's a gradient of the anti-gravity force. So gradient implies it declines, the effect declines as you get farther from the source. What about under the craft? Is that also a gradient? Is there some anti-gravity under the craft? Sorry folks, I have a lot of questions. It is interesting that it is possible to make symmetric cells like usual honeycombs instead of cuneiform ones. A half of this ether wind can blow in the ground. It is all right. It is unreasonable. About half of the power is lost. Power, however, can be increased by decreasing cell size by 0.5 what? By 50%, I think he means. Decrease the cell size of the structural cavity by 50%, and then that increases your power. But technologically, such nets are easier to build. What does he mean? Larger ones are easier to build, smaller ones are more difficult, or the smaller ones are easier to build? I guess I guess for nature, it's easier to build the smaller ones. Nature's going to work on a nano scale, a billionth of a meter. But for us, manufacturing them larger would be easier because we can see it and manipulate it much easier. Now let's talk about the cell's fuel. Grebennikov noted that in case with the effect of cavitary structures experiments, it is necessary to take the sun into account under normal conditions. Well, now he's conjuring up with what Gordon Michael Scallion said about Atlantis. He said that they had figured out how to get energy with some sort of interaction with the sun. And I'm not sure what he meant, but here we have someone who claims to understand how Grebennikov created anti-gravity and flew a craft around at 1,000 miles an hour, 1,000 feet above the ground. And he says, Grebennikov noted that in case with the effect of cavitary structures experiments, it is necessary to take the sun into account under normal conditions. So the fuel is coming from the sun. Ooh, fly this thing at night and see what happens. The point is that together with sunlight, an intensive ether or lepton, this is the same, flow goes from the sun. That's exactly what Michael Scallion said, that there was this flow back and forth. Back and forth, not just the solar collector converting sunlight into electricity. The power they used in Atlantis was reciprocal, like he says here. Flow goes from the sun. As it was noted by Grebennikov during takeoff, Grebennikov's aircraft was always carried away in a direction which was opposite to the sun. This happened because from the sun side, the fans got more effective supply and worked more effectively, moving the aircraft in another direction. I don't understand that. This is the answer. In the event when the aircraft was moved away due to the different reasons, this cannot be explained by usual conditions. In this case, different environmental disturbances take place. We will not consider them here because they are fluctuations which do not hamper in flying. Well, I'm really confused now. If he's getting his fuel from the sun and there is no sun, where does the fuel come from? Does he store the fuel somehow? Or does he fly without fuel? I hope you guys understand it, because I don't. Let us now think about electrostatics. If in all descriptions of Grebennikov's experiments, including the beetle regularity, 2 layers of the reticular structures are more powerful than 1 layer takes place, how a fact can be explained that a folded fan, a multi-layer package of nets, is much weaker than an unfolded by Grebennikov 1, that is, place all nets in 1 layer? Well, the translation from Russian is not understandable to me. Reticular means network. In biology, they have an endoplasmic reticulum, just means an endoplasm network. So he talks here about 2 layers of reticular structures are more powerful than 1 layer takes place. How a fact can be explained that a folded fan, a multi-layer package of nets, see there's the word nets, reticular nets, is much weaker than an unfolded by the Grebennikov one, that is, place all nets in 1 layer. So he's asking a question himself. He doesn't understand. Well, if he doesn't understand, does that make you feel better? No, I want a hoverboard. I want to fly at 1,000 miles an hour. And having the explainer, the teacher, tell us that he doesn't know really makes me insecure in my position. It is obvious that power increases during fan unfolding. Quote, moving a handle, I unfold the blinds again and hoik vertically. Hoik? I never heard this word before. I wonder if that's hold vertically. Because hoik vertically, let me look that word up. Don't go away. Google advanced search top line hoik, H-O-I-C-K dictionary. It says hoik, informal, to rise or raise abruptly and sharply. So it is a word. She hoiked her dress above her knees. Ooh, that's an exciting idea. Okay, so hoik is a word. Continuing, quote, A flexible cable inside the handle transmits motion from the left handle to the gravity blind. Folding and unfolding them, I carry out takeoff or landing. God, this is fantastic. What increases during the blind's unfolding? Right, their square increases. I don't know what that means. But not just square, but a square of interaction with the second layer. Do you guys get it? It's too hard to visualize. It is understandable that there are no additional elements under the fans, but there is such a structure above them. Remember about the sheet metal? Why electrostatics? Various purely electrical elements are installed on the platform. It means that electricity is used. It is also known that an electrostatic field of high potential can produce yield. Remember what Tesla told, and is not consumed during this. It is possible to obtain high voltage of dozens kilovolt by rather compact devices which use batteries. In Novosibirsk in the 1990s, a whole kind of such devices was sold, from chokers to stimulators. I never heard of a choker. I have to say this. When you're explaining something so difficult, you really need pictures. Very carefully drawn pictures and animations. And I don't think that anyone should attempt to explain these things without animations. Edward Leeds Scalnan wrote a book. And whereas he was a genius when it comes to electricity and magnetism, and he was able to float 9-ton blocks like they were helium balloons, and he claimed that he understood the principles that built the pyramids, as a writer, he was deficient. And other people took his work, and they created the images to help us understand. That's what we need here. We need someone to come along and have a scientific mind and understand these principles, and then create animations and pictures so that I can understand, because I don't understand. And the geniuses out there who are going to take this raw information, raw data, and they're going to turn it into a hoverboard so I can have a little bit of fun before I die, they need to understand, and I'm not capable of doing it. So if you're good at animations and you understand this stuff, do the world a big favor. Show us what they're talking about. It's too difficult for me to understand. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if I'm not alone. In addition, we have the problem that we have someone who obviously speaks Russian and understands what Grebennikov was doing, but his English is not completely understandable by us. His sentence structure is a little strange, and he's probably taking the Russian and just directly translating it, and it comes off a little bit more difficult to understand than if a Native American, an Indian, American Indian, if a native English speaker were to read this text. Continuing, the next card. Such a box can be easily placed in the box under the post. Pressing the button starter, the button on the left of the handlebar, the transformer turns on for a short time, and the terminals plate, located a little higher than the nets, obtains a considerable static charge. How did he figure all this stuff out? The green diode indicates a charging degree of the terminal. The terminal cannot discharge itself during operation, but it is slowly discharged through the air, a so-called corona discharge. Well, I have no idea what that paragraph up to here means. Let me continue. Thus, Grebennikov periodically had to press the mentioned button, taking into account the diode's light. It is possible to build an automatic scheme controlling this process, but Grebennikov did not know radio electronics and hardly knew electrotechnology. My God, how did he do this? He goes from bugs' wings that exhibit anti-gravity properties to flying a vehicle that doesn't even mess his hair up when he travels 1,000 miles per hour? And this apparatus that he built has diodes and intricate electronics, and I'm totally lost just reading it, and he not only understood it but built it. So we really need a genius here in electronics to understand what's going on, and I hope that genius has a little bit more than electronics, because we're dealing with cavity structural effects, and he has to understand the principles, and he has to be able to build it, and it has to work. And then he has to build the electronic apparatus that goes with it, with all the diodes and everything, and then maybe we'll have a hoverboard. I thought it was going to be simple. Here it is, don't you know? I get on it, and away I go. There is only one vexed question. What did Grebennikov show on the picture? It could be either both halves of the platform, or only its back half. The first version will be asserted by supporters of a rough interpretation of the platform's operation, a repulsive force which is directed down, vortex technologies and others. The second version is confirmed by a reasonable thought. There are no two internal vertical partitions, to which rotary hinges are fixed, between the fans on the picture. It means that two back fans are shown on the picture. Our supposition, we consider a force directed up and blowing at the platform from below. Understanding the construction this way, it is possible to explain how the brake is carried out by incline of the back couple of the fans. This is how the treadle or treadle on the platform works. Accordingly, the front fans work the same way, but mirroring, creating traction in the motion direction. It is necessary to note, just in case, for military men and cosmonauts, that the incline changes not the whole fan, but each separate plate. Each plate has its own axis. I understood absolutely nothing of that whole page. Nothing, not one word. This is a crime against humanity to make something so difficult to understand. This makes calculus look like arithmetic. The left handle usually works only with the back fans. It would not be surprising if two back fans will turn out to be much stronger than the front ones. That is, creates the vertical traction. Grebennikov stands only on the back half of the platform. Make your conclusions. The right handle always controls only the front fans, that is, creates the horizontal traction, the white diode lights. Rotation, as it was already discussed, is transmitted mechanically by twisting a thick, flexible cable. The rotary effort is transferred from the lower transmitting unit in the center of the box under the handlebar by a standard car method, that is, through hard control rods with trunnion balls at their ends. But the trunnion balls can be absent directly to rotary unit of the front fan's bonding. Did you get that? Jeez. The back fans are not used by Grebennikov for control. This allows not transmitting all this to the back block filters. So the back couple is mechanically simpler than the front one by 1/3. During flight, the fans are unfolded, and when the treadle is pressed, the treadle drive rotates the plates and hampers the platform. After preliminary turning off the gas handle, the white diode goes out and the red one lights. The effort for the plates unfolding and their turn to the back fans is transmitted through flexible cables. This allows easily folding the platform. Thus the treadle is an analog of the right handle, but for the front fans instead of the back ones. I think he couldn't have come up with this himself. I think that, like Einstein said, ideas come from space. I think he received this telepathically without even knowing he was receiving it telepathically. And I think this was a gift to us to free us from the slavery of petroleum. And I think that there is clearly a cover-up. They're trying to smear the name of Grebennikov because all the articles you find read exactly the same. Somebody clearly does not want this out. Let me guess who it could be. The oil companies? Invisibility of the gravity plane. A reason of a pilot's unstable invisibility, described by Grebennikov, is caused by 4 crossed field exits instead of the place of one field's influence. A product space is where a pilot stands. If only one field would exist, it would be stable. The fans, according to the flight mode, change radiation power and radiation direction all the time. Takeoff/fall, acceleration, slow down, and mainly turn. So we just have to comment presence of the invisibility effect. Light could freely come to the sphere around Grebennikov in the influence zone of the field created by the nets, but could not come back. This is why Grebennikov was invisible. I'm glad that he explained the invisibility. I just wish I could understand it. He could see everything because light reached his retina, but no reflected beams came from him because the entire light, a flow of particles coming from outside, was absorbed by the process generated by the nets. That is, light was utilized. A flow of particles bringing the fuel to the nets. Well, that word fuel kind of bothers me because I never heard of him spending any money for fuel, and I'm sure he didn't buy gasoline, but something is producing what they're calling fuel to the nets. And if I read this over and over every day, maybe after a year I would understand it, but I'm having trouble with it the first time through. This is the first time I ever saw any explanation. I've read about Grebennikov before, and I read his book. But he never said one word about how this was constructed and all the diodes, and I don't know if what I'm reading is disinformation or this is the real stuff. Maybe somebody thought it would be protected if they wrote something so complicated that no one could understand it. I don't know what's going on. I'm thinking out loud. And as a reader, you should be thinking, and you should be considering what's written and what I say, plus what you come up with on your own. And if you discuss it with anybody else who's an enthusiast, maybe they have ideas as well, and you can discuss it with them. I hope that we can get to the point where we have these flying vehicles that cost us nothing to fly, and I hope we can fly safely. When Grebennikov stood on the ground, he was visible because the blinds were folded and did not work. Therefore, they did not absorb light or any other particles. As soon as he began to rise and increase the power, increase the fan's square, he smoothly, not suddenly, started becoming invisible. Wow, this is incredible. Of course, the invisibility was full during flight, and coming back, the process was the same. That is why, when Grebennikov flew low above the ground and generated low power, he became visible, and he cast a shadow. The same happened during quick landing in the falling like a stone mode, when the blinds were folded and he became fully visible. This is why it is possible to take a photograph of Grebennikov during takeoff, when he flew low. But when he flew above the pine tops, it was impossible to photograph Grebennikov because there were no reflected beams from him, thus he was invisible. Humidity and electrostatics. Grebennikov noticed one more detail. It was impossible to fly by the platform during rainy weather. On the one hand, actually increased humidity does not promote electrostatics, and a bronze poplar borer flies only during sunny weather, because chitin is very electrostatic. A beetle most likely uses the following effect: statics plus ECS equals strong anti-gravity. Wow, fascinating. On the other hand, as Grebennikov wrote, quote, "Put a shower head on a tap and turn on cold water. Slowly bring your palm to a beam of falling drops aside. Most people feel heat at this moment." In fact, this is ECS. I believe that means the effects of cavity structures, increased by motion of new elements of the multi-layer net. Falling water drops and gaps between them. After training in a kitchen or in a bathroom, feel stronger effects of cavity structures at fountains or waterfalls. That's what Schauberger was talking about. Even if atmosphere pressure is not falling, remote rain creates a strong effect of cavity structures field influencing at a distance of many kilometers. Remember how we want to sleep before rain, even in a closed room. Effects of cavity structures cannot be screened. Many small drops and gaps between them form a multi-dimensional void structure which influences by its effects of cavity structures. This, however, does not help the device based on the same principle to fly. Under the picture with the bronze poplar borer, Grebennikov wrote, quote, "When a big Middle Asia bronze poplar borer sits like that, this is live, on a finger, the finger feels like it is pulled up." Unquote. Wow! Pay your attention. The insect is live. Possibly wing cases of a dried beetle will not show the repulsion effect. I repeat, possibly. What do I mean? Perhaps the dried beetle has no sufficient static charge on its chitin, and this prevents display of anti-gravity effect. Interesting. He's giving us some of the secrets. It is also possible that statics is transmitted not by wing cases surface, but by hemolymph of a blood type of insects. Or maybe this is not statics, but something else. Well, it would be very hard to discover if people looked only at dead animals because they wouldn't find the effects. As an example, here is a small fragment from Mr. X's work. The editor's note, Mr. X is a visitor from http://gragons-matrix.narod.ru site forum. I doubt that website is active. This is a quote here, and it appears to be from the editor. He says, quote, "Once I accidentally killed a standard and not prominent ladybird," I think he means ladybug. I knew about Grebennikov's discovery from the article. I am confused to confess, but I tried even laying one wing case on another, but it gave no result. I had no microscope, and I used a standard magnifying glass for examination of the wing cases. Even under such a small magnification, I could clearly see inside thin longitudinal walls or edges. Following more curiosity, I crushed one of the wing case between my fingers. As a result, a red liquid flew out of it. My curiosity continues. This is why I took a standard flat battery, a lamp, and piece of cross-patching. I found out an interesting fact. The liquid was a conductor. It's got electrolytes, it should be. Anything coming from an animal, an insect, is going to have electrolytes in the blood or whatever that liquid was. Salts, perhaps, in liquid, and it will conduct electricity. After I read the book and analyzed the pictures, it dawned on me that we have a simplest electrolytic condenser with hemolymph, insect's blood, as electrolyte and dielectric, the chitin. Well, he's talking electronics, and I have no idea what he just said. He's talking about a dielectric, the chitin, and an electrolyte, the insect's blood, which he's calling hemolymph. That's the end of the quote. The next column reads, "What an idea, the electrolytic condenser, what do you think?" In general, it's obvious that even if we get the necessary wing cases, a lot of different experiments must be carried out. But how to impact properties of the live wing cases to the dead ones? Grebennikov's platform worked. This is a fact. Where is it a fact? He reports it, that's firsthand. That is a testimony and a fact, I guess. Grebennikov's platform worked. This is a fact, so it is possible to technically reproduce the effect of the live wing cases. Okay, we know that Grebennikov had electricity flowing, and he was able to turn on electricity to these dead cells and turn them alive with a static charge of some kind. And he achieved the same effect that he would achieve if the animal was alive. The editor's note. Here it is appropriate to remember readers about another approach to creation of engines, which is called asymmetrical condensers. Articles devoted to this topic have been published in Our magazine. I never heard of it. Okay, he's going to talk about some more evidence here. Now remember that first-hand personal testimony is considered evidence in a court of law, but hearsay is not. If you saw something and you report it, that's evidence, that's a fact. If someone else heard you say it and they repeated it in court, I heard so-and-so say this, that's not acceptable, generally. Eyewitnesses. As it was found out, Grebennikov hoped to remain invisible in vain. People who saw him in the sky were found. Mr. X writes, quote, I was interested in Grebenikov's question since an article called Night Flight Over the City had been published in Molodost Sibiru newspaper in 1991. A precondition was my only observation of UFO flight in the middle of March 1990. The UFO did not look like a saucer or an object. The observed object was practically the same as on the picture, though I cannot judge whether it was Grebenikov's flight or not. You can see they misspelled the word though. It's okay, I caught it. Biological hazard. Grebennikov died at the age of 74. The age is venerable, but death was caused by a number of diseases which can be obtained, for example, as a result of irradiation of a strong electromagnetic field. And Grebennikov confirmed that he obtained the diseases due to the flights by the platform. Well, he's going a bit far. He's an entomologist and now he's a doctor. Maybe he felt he was getting sicker and sicker. Nobody mentioned the names of the diseases so that we all have a crack at it to do our own investigation. And doctors in English-speaking countries who hear this would have a chance to weigh in. So this is not reliable information. We don't know how Grebennikov died. We don't have a death report. We can't read Russian. And this author states it, but doesn't show his evidence. So I'm not a believer yet. This is not a religion. This is supposed to be science. We don't believe on faith. Next sentence. But a triangular bearer frame can be made of pipes. A platform can be placed in each corner of the frame, and a pilot's seat can be placed in the middle of this construction. In this case, the pilot will never be in a field of the platform's influence. Well, that's a stretch. If the wings are creating this magnetic field, it wouldn't matter if he stood or sat. Is the author saying that the magnetic field goes up above his head, and when he's sitting down, his head misses this gravitational or magnetic field? What kind of field is it? Is it a magnetic field or is it a gravitational field? It defies gravity. It has to be a gravitational field. What is the relationship between electricity, because you're talking about electrolytes, that's electricity, conducting electricity, that's what electrolytes do. So we're talking about an electromagnetic apparatus. Some scientists has to be able to crack the link between gravity and electronics and magnetism. Electronics and magnetism, we can see the relationship there. Pass a magnet through a coil and you'll push electrons through that coil and generate electricity. So we know that electricity and magnetism are related. We can create a magnet by running electricity through a wire. What's the relationship with gravity? Because that's the big question, and that's the most exciting aspect of this whole thing. He found in his entomology that some bugs have cavity structures that have effects, and he felt his finger pulling when the live animal was on his finger. This is all fascinating, and it's a frontier of science that's unembarked except by Grebennikov, as far as I know. Maybe Russia launched 1,000 scientists to investigate this phenomena because they want anti-gravity. Look how much fuel it would save. They could stop using their oil and just sell it to the rest of the world and pocket the cash. A product like mazout, they won't even sell it to the world because they need it. It comes from oil. It's a partially refined oil product. Next sentence. So he's talking about sitting down instead of standing up, and this will take the pilot out of the magnetic field, and he won't have to die at age 74, such a young man. Moreover, Grebennikov mentioned that the triangular design with 3 elements, net platforms, is an ideal kind of control. I don't know what they're talking about. What triangular design? I saw a square. It looked like it was about 14 inches by 14 inches or so. I would say 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters. Is that right? 25 centimeters by 25 centimeters. In order to exclude a pilot's contact with atmosphere, a hermetic cockpit is installed. It provides full comfort and safety. Well, if you put a cockpit over his head, now you've got to air condition it because it would get awfully hot under glass. And if it isn't glass, how can you see where you're going? This is all going to add weight. You're going to have to kill more bugs and build a larger platform. I think what he flew was okay, and if he lived to be 74, give me one of those. Now we have a question and answer session. First question, why did Grebennikov stand flying instead of, for example, sitting on the platform with his legs down? And in this case, why not make a shorter handlebar? Well, that's easy. I could answer that question. He wanted to pop the clutch and do wheelies. Let's see what the answer they gave is. Both the platform and Grebennikov were completely in the zone of compensated gravity's influence, that is, their mass, and more precisely, their weight, was not positive but negative, which allowed flying. If he would put his legs out of the field's limits, their weight would become normal again. That is about 30 to 40 kilograms, and since 2.2 pounds is 1 kilogram, we're talking about 66 to 88 pounds from his legs. As a result, the platform would change its vertical position in space to a horizontal one due to outweigh by the appeared weight, and Grebennikov would just fall from it. In general, nothing can be put out of the platform's limits during flight. Well, what are the platform's limits? There has to be some curvature of the magnetic field in order for everything inside that platform to be in the magnetic field. The magnetic field would have to be tall enough and broad enough to include everything. So I would say even if he put his arms outstretched to the side, he would still find that they are weightless, but I don't know. It would be interesting to see a graph of the platform and the magnetic field around it. Next question. Thus it is impossible to build a device where the pilot will be out of the dangerous radiation of the blinds. It is necessary to be in the field's influence zone as Grebennikov did? Answer. No, this is a mistake. The pilot's cockpit can be placed inside the limits of the admittedly harmful radiation. It is just necessary to have at least 3 independent platforms placed on the edges of such a saucer in the device's construction. Besides, the blinds must be made more powerful than Grebennikov's blinds because we will have to carry a not nullified mass of the cockpit and a pilot placed in the center between the irradiators. Moreover, it is necessary to have an automatic stability device which would remove which would remove most of the aircraft manipulating by powers of all 3 radiators. The way it's written, it doesn't make sense. Okay, I read the PDF file was in Italian, and it was guys horsing around with this same thing, anti-gravity, and they had a platform and they were also above the ground, and they took a picture of it. And after writing it, they got very sick. They said their bones would hurt all over, their muscles and internal organs would hurt, and they said that this thing is nasty. It really does have an effect on your body. Now, they looked Russian. The buildings in the pictures looked Russian, like they were in Russia. They were very old brick buildings, and they were in bad shape. It did not look like Italy, it looked like Russia. The guys looked Russian, and the article was in Italian. I will try to find it. Okay, I found it. It was on my computer, and the file was a PDF file entitled Avion, A-V-I-O-N. I did a search. It was a Google advanced search. 2 keywords, Avion and Grebennikov. And I pulled up that PDF file on the first page of the search results. I opened it, and it's identical to the one I have. It's in Italian, and if you don't read Italian, you really can't make use of it. Somebody may have done a translation, but the PDF file that I have does not allow for copying it. The one on the internet also does not allow you to copy even one sentence. In order to translate this, it's going to be very difficult. Let's continue now. Question: why do cells, for example pipes, oriented vertically irradiate stronger than the ones oriented horizontally? Remember how Grebennikov tried to tie some wing cases together, and all his experiments on the effects of cavity structures if ether is everywhere. Well, the question is hard to understand, but I gather that there's a difference between vertical and horizontal pipes, whatever that is. Anyway, the answer: there are not sufficient quantity of ether wind in space between two objects in a vector's direction from one object to another, whatever that means. As we see, the Earth has a huge size and accordingly considerably ties up a stream flowing through it. This causes its strong gravity influence on other objects. If we place any cell, which he's calling a pipe, horizontally, ether will be absorbed from the vertical direction through the walls of such a cell. I hope you understand that. Due to the fact that the lepton flow, in this case, is very depressed, we obtain low efficiency. If we place any cell or pipe vertically, ether will be absorbed from the horizontal direction. In the horizontal direction, ether winds are not screened because the Earth is lower than the pipe, and for example, the platform is higher. The second object can be missing. Well, I don't know what he's talking about, and so I have no comment. Question: what is a fractal principle? Answer: imagine standard honeycombs. We take one hexagonal cell. If it has the right size antinodes of the ECS, effective cavity structures field, from each wall of this cell must coincide exactly along the central axis. Reflection of de Broglie waves, that is, the same maximum of the stationary wave. We have a certain power. Let us add 6 cells along the circumference. It is an approximate hexagon. Antinodes of the ECS field from the newly formed external sides of this big hexagon will coincide again and meet in the center, but these will be other reflections, stronger than the first ones observed by us. Both groups of maximums sum up, and as a result we obtain a field which is stronger than created by all cells participating in the process and taken individually. Now we add 12 cells along the external outline, and so on. The effects of cavity structures maximums of different ranges will sum up all the time. This is clear. This is a clear fractal principle. Obviously, this is why there were so many hexagons in Grebennikov's book. Question: how can we work with microcell nets, press them, assemble them in block boards, and install these boards to the device if a cell will immediately fly if we let it take off? Answer: this is a widely spread mistake. The nets do not fly themselves. Only objects placed in the compensated gravity zone above the horizontally placed nets has a weight equal to 0. Difficulties appear only at the last stage of assembling, when powers of construction elements are relatively strong and influence each other. In this case, assembling the device, it is necessary to watch the nets being in the vertical position. This relates to Grebennikov. When he folded and unfolded his platform, he put it vertically, the board. Question: Grebennikov could not turn at small power of the vertical traction during takeoff, landing, and slowdown, could he? Answer: yes. It is because in the event of the minimal vertical traction, the blinds are hardly unfolded. This does not allow normally turning the plates around their axis, change their incline angle. During slowdown, a drive of the gas handle turns off. This makes use of the handlebar useless because the plates of the front fans are placed in the horizontal plane too. Due to the fact that the back fans bore the main vertical load, it is possible that the front fans are half unfolded in their minimal position when the right handle is not turned, which allows using the handlebar during low power flight modes. If it is not so, it is still possible to do so. It seems to me that Grebennikov did not do this because he was pulled away from the sun and he could not fight with it, and therefore could not manipulate the turning function during takeoff. Fundamentally, these details do not influence flight because motion is inertialess, and during change of reapportion of an ether wind flow, a motion vector changes at the same time. Question: could the handlebar really turn? Answer: let us think. Actually, the left handle is busy. It unfolds the blinds and creates the vertical traction. The right handle, according to the description, changes incline of the blinds elements, that is, creates the horizontal traction from 0 to maximum. Thus only the treadle is left of all control tools. But using the treadle, if we consider it as an analog of another turn handle from a motorbike, we can turn the horizontal plane only in one side. Motion of the treadle is one way, like motion of the handle. It is very inconvenient and therefore unreal. So we make a conclusion that the handlebar actually turns to the left and to the right, and the handlebar controls turning. The photographs confirm this. Question: how can you prove that the treadle is used as a brake and is not, for example, a device controlling operation of a complex motion device? Answer: let us think again. Both handles change speed from 0 to maximum, one vertically while another horizontally. In order to contradict, if necessary, a vertical force, it is possible simply to unfold the blinds, de-energize them, and due to the fact that the platform always flies with its bottom turned to the ground, gravity force does its work for us. It is different with the horizontal motion. We can gather speed from 0 to maximum without any problems, but how can we quickly slow down if necessary? According to Grebennikov's words, there's not even air friction. It leads to a necessity to have another control element on the platform, that is, the treadle brake, which acts the same way but opposite to the right handle. Question: it is not logical to trust one's life to presence or absence of voltage in the accumulator. What if it would run down during flight? Answer: first, this is unlikely. Unlikely. Second, even if this happens, nothing fatal will happen. The nets will work, though, not with maximal power. This event possibly will lead to a smooth landing of the aircraft because the high potential terminal will run down not quickly but smoothly. Well, in order for Grebennikov to develop this device, he had to go through some trial and error testing over years, and it's not there. So what did he do? Just dream this all up and then build it according to what was in his mind, and once he built it, it worked perfectly? There are too many devices on here for control. He had to have some problems somewhere, and then he solved the problems with a resolution of some device, some control mechanism. I wonder where his papers are, because as a scientist, he's recording everything in a notebook, a lab book of some kind. And if that's missing, then the whole story is not here. That's my guess. What's yours? Next question. Why did Grebennikov try to draw energy vortex exhaust from the platform on pictures of night flights? Answer: possibly Grebennikov used not cone cells but symmetric ones in his design. That is, an ether flow was distributed up as well as down in them. This variant is a working one too. Taking into account use of high voltage potential, ether flows carried bigger particles, charged ions for example, which became visible in darkness. They were formed into single discrete pseudo-vortexes due to presence of holes in the blinds, metal plates. Metal absorbs or hamper radiation while the holes let them pass freely. Well, I don't understand all that, and I'm reading this because somebody out there is very clever, and they're going to understand all of this and build one and fly it. And then I'll get my hoverboard after all. But I'll be so damned old I won't be able to enjoy the thing. I'll be too old to pick up chicks. Question: why do you think the drive from the right rotary handle goes only to the front fans but not for all of them? Answer: here's what Grebennikov wrote. Quote, "The upper part of my device is really a bike's one. The right handle is used for horizontal forward motion, which is made by incline of both groups of the blinds, also through the cable." Unquote. He wrote both. That is, he meant the two front fans. A fan is a single group of the blinds, or in other words, a block board. So, if he wants to go forward, it's just like a motorbike. You use the right hand, and you, and the bike goes forward. Cool. Can't wait to ride one. Appendices, scientific hypotheses, and extracts from articles. By the way, if he's reading from Grebennikov's writings, then he does have some kind of a lab book with full explanation. And that's nice. I think we should build one. Lepton hypothesis of B.I. Azikov extracts. Now, a lepton is a combination of three things. It's a neutrino, an electron, and something else, maybe a proton. I can't remember. But before you read this, you should look it up. Consequence 5, according to the formulas, an opportunity follows that high values of gradients of lepton physical fields objects can be observed in zones opposite to acute angles of solid bodies, geological rocks, on the tectonic plates' edges, on rock peaks, on tops of big cliffs and pyramids, etc. Particularly, matter outflow in the form of leptons and other elementary particles is possible. Well, you're going to have a good understanding of leptons and plate tectonics, and this is over almost everyone's head. Discovery of electron emission in zones of geologic rocks fractions, USSR 1984, is a particular manifestation of a more general law. I believe the Soviet Union had twice as many scientists as America had. I don't know how many Russians there are in the field of science, so if they made developments in this science, I wouldn't be surprised, because 1984 was still the USSR. I think that might have been the year that Gorbachev broke it all up. Can't remember. A body placed opposite to acute projected angles of other bodies or solid rocks on tops of cliffs and pyramids, etc., can be irradiated by leptons, whatever that means. Irradiated. Send out radiation to kill bacteria? Irradiated like food? Can be irradiated by leptons. On the contrary, bodies placed inside hollow planes of other solid bodies, for example, inside pipes, cylinders, and cones, or placed in a polyhedron or three-dimensional angle, can experience swap-out or microleptons. Okay, if you say so. Biological objects with weakened microlepton fields can be charged with lepton energy on tops of rocks or pyramids. On the contrary, excessively excited biological objects calm down quicker if they are placed into internal cavities of solid matter and negative curvature, or into an angle, a bay, etc., with geometric imbalance of matter, which is equivalent to negative curvature, possibly a custom of many nations. To calm down overexcited children, placing them in a corner makes sense. So they're saying if you place a child in a corner because it has surroundings, that the child will calm down. Overexcited children placed in a corner makes sense. I don't see how 90-degree angles in a corner are the same as a bay, for example, which is a curve. So I think that there's nothing to this science. This science doesn't make sense. If you could show me mathematically how it works, maybe it would make sense, but placing a child in a corner makes sense? Goofy. Consequence 14. According to the lepton hypothesis, each body is permeated extensively by lepton streams, which bombard it and balance lepton pressure up to a zero average resultant. Interaction of leptons with a body happens all over the body's volume, not only on its surface. If preponderance or deficiency of lepton pressure will be artificially created just on one side by focusing lepton streams, or, on the contrary, by obstruct them from the body by some screen or an artificial lepton vortex, a no-zero resultant can be created, which will be able to move light objects. Well, I'd like to see that done experimentally, because, frankly, it sounds like Al Gore science to me. It's good to go through this course, because even if you don't understand it today, some of this is going to stay with you, and as you go through life and you discover some of the natural phenomena of the universe, you just might be able to apply this and make it all work. Right now, the lepton is so unfamiliar to most people, and for them to bandy it about like it's a real thing, and I believe that our understanding of subatomic particles is at the failure rate. We understand so little, and the aliens have said that they have, for each subatomic particle we know about, they know about 1,000. So apparently it's a very complicated field with a whole lot of information that we don't know, and if we know only 1 in 1,000, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. And so that's why I say we're at the failure rate, because you cannot operate with one piece of knowledge when there is 1,000. You're just not going to be able to make the right decisions. All these hypotheses and theories are all baloney. You have to start with that assumption and then find out what's wrong with them. Next paragraph. This can explain telekinesis phenomenon, particularly experiments of V. Avdiv, R. Kuleshova, and others, and also poltergeist effects. Oh, now we're going to get into the explanation of poltergeist based on this lepton theory? It was a hypothesis a minute ago, and now he's going all the way to explain poltergeist effects? You have to, as a reader, recognize when the author has gone way off the deep end, and I think that applies here. What do you think? The lepton hypothesis, see, he's calling it a hypothesis. What is a hypothesis? When you're observing something, the behavior of something in nature, you collect your facts until you reach a point where you say, I think I understand the behavior of this, and I'm going to lay out a hypothesis. And when you test that hypothesis, if it holds up every time, then it becomes a theory. We have a few observations, we have a few facts on the table to consider, and now we have a hypothesis, not a theory. The lepton hypothesis allows comprehending the universal gravity mechanism expressed by Newton's law from a new point of view. Two bodies located close to each other partially screen each other from lepton streams pressure. From the external sides, preponderance of lepton pressure in comparison with a pressure from the side of a space between the bodies is created because each body partially hampers lepton streams coming through it. If a point mass M is located near distributed mass big M, a force equal to the screening force influences small m. Where d is a constant of proportionality, p is a density of matter in the distributed mass, g is a distance and a multitude of distances from variable body point large M to point mass small m. L is a body angle corresponding to angle sizes of distributed mass big M and a point of location of point mass small m. The function of R is a function of body M geometry. 12 is a function of geometry, and curvature of a lepton stream is given point of space. Well, I hope he understands what he just wrote, because now he's talking mathematical, and he didn't give a formula. He gave all of the symbols and their meanings. Now where's the formula? I don't understand how we can go from hypothesis to mathematical formula. Actually, it's not a formula. It's just an assignment of the variables. I just think it's premature to be going to math already. We've got a hypothesis. We haven't tested it. We don't have a theory, and it's not time for math yet. The lepton hypothesis allows not postulating but concluding, substantiating theoretically and comprehending understanding Newton's law, understanding the concealed gravity and remote influence mechanism. If two bodies with distributed masses m1 and m2 are located close to each other, a resultant force does not change fundamentally, only a conclusion of Newton's law conclusion of Newton's law becomes more complex while the fundamental nature of the dependence does not change. Thus, according to the lepton hypothesis, attraction is a deficiency of repulsion. That is, the law of gravity can be considered as a consequence of the law of lepton repulsion or lepton compression pressure during bodies screening, which leads to that the bodies are pressed to each other. If the lepton hypothesis is right, it is possible to suppose a potential possibility of varying gravity and inertia mass of a body under certain conditions. 1. During change of lepton streams focusing with the help of lepton lenses, causing their concentration on the given lepton rockets and lepton flying disks. 2. During huge speed of lepton vortexes rotation with high angular velocity, which is equivalent to screening from lepton streams. If the lepton hypothesis is right, the mentioned mechanism gives a possibility of partial or complete gravity control. Ooh, now that's getting exciting. So we might be able to have a chunk of cast iron that weighs 5,000 tons, and we can lift that thing up and fly it around because we understand gravity and lepton streams. Ooh, I hope you guys are right. The suggested mechanism of potentially possible partial or complete levitation must be thoroughly checked experimentally. I wonder what the aliens think of this theory or hypothesis. If the lepton hypothesis is right, lepton engines, rockets, and flying discs are possible. Well, we gotta ask the aliens because they would know. The nature of cavity structural effects. What is the physical nature of cavity structure effects? Many suppositions and hypotheses have been expressed, but unfortunately many of them are connected with extrasensory perception, which is fashionable among modern intellectuals for some reasons. A theory of Leningrad physician, doctor of technical science, V.F. Zolotarev, deserves better attention. It was developed by him earlier and experimentally confirmed now. As a result of long combined researches, we characterized the discovery as an unknown effect of multi-cavity structure interaction with living systems, consisting in that, due to interference, de Broglie's waves accompanying motion of electron flows in solid walls of cavities form a macroscopic field of multi-cavity structures which cause change of functional state of living objects located in this field. De Broglie waves are peculiar to moving microparticles of any body. They are compensated inside the body and displayed as radiation on its surface. They are so short wave and super high frequency that instruments pick them up only in the form of diffraction, but still they helped science. Remember peculiar pictures of electrons and neutrons obtained on crystals and films with the help of de Broglie waves. Nobody thought that these scanty radiations can influence living matter somehow, and they did not influence, at least near flat objects. But near multi-cavity structures, where a square of solid bodies is big and multiply curved, de Broglie waves are put together and form, like musical overtones, harmonies with lower frequencies, thus lengthening and strengthening. Due to laying on each other in cells, they form antinodes maximums of stationary de Broglie waves. Striking on these passive barriers, nerve impulses glitch, changing their frequency and speed and causing not only seeming feelings but also sometimes considerable physiological changes. Stationary de Broglie waves do not have their own energy, and therefore the law of energy of conservation is not violated. Due to the fact that de Broglie waves moves in physical vacuum, the effect of cavity structures must permeate everything. We observe it when we uselessly try to stop the effect up by any screen. That's a weird sentence. The editor's note. In 1996, Professor Zolotarev gave me a copy of his manuscript. We studied it, prepared a plan of experiments, and began to search for investors. It was useless. Our situation at the time could be described by words starvation and poverty. I remember that Professor had to raise chickens in his flat for some food. Possibly now somebody will be seriously interested in beginning a research program on the effect of cavity structures aimed at creation of real engines for space systems. A.V. Frolov. I recall Jerry Decker saying that Grebennikov only earned $24 a month. It's a shame that in a world we can afford so many $2 trillion wars, and we can't afford to give scientists who are working on free energy and space flight without spending all of these fuels. We can't even give them enough so they can eat. This is disgraceful. Disgraceful that killing children in wars is more important than feeding scientists. This is why we're never going to get anywhere. We're going to become extinct before we achieve anything purposeful. Energy fields of geometric forms. From KeelyNet. How about that? That's Jerry Decker's website. Works of Wilhelm Reich are also connected with change ether density. We would like to express some interesting thoughts. Energy fields of geometric forms are special effects connected with the modern concept of ether. Some optimal geometrical forms and materials can be used for constructing devices which react under influence of only environmental conditions, that is, without additional external stimulation. In other words, free energy, maybe? Contraction details of two simple devices which produce a tangible linear force influence without the use of additional energy at the input. Well, that sounds really good. Really good. You can get linear force without putting any energy into the system. It is possible to note two meanings of these training demonstration devices. One, they prove that an etheric kind of matter exists and any average person can feel it. And two, they demonstrate reliable methods of ether activation which can be used for new energy applications. Well, that is a very exciting page to read. It gives us hope of free energy and a lot of it. Other examples of devices with efficiency more than one include a venerable organ pipe and an electromagnetic antenna. These devices work using resonance method when relatively low vibration of amplitude is reflected back. An echo signal can be many times more than an input signal in dependence on sizes of the device. The most effective size of the resonator accurately corresponds with a quarter of the initial wavelength. Resonance will also occur with any lengths which are divisible by an odd number of quarter of waves lengths. In these cases, we find that geometry of the specific device has minor significance. If the geometry is optimized for conditions at the input, a maximal increase or an increased echo can be obtained. We can summarize characteristics of these super single devices as devices using geometrical energy fields because intensity of full energy of echo, which can be produced only as a function of size, form, and location. Remembering that we can suppose that certain highly optimized geometrical forms could provide for an increased echo without any additional input signal at all. Such a device could induce an effective echo increase, the finest vibrations at quantum level, which are much lower than the threshold, our ability to measure them. It's a little bit difficult to read these Russian translations because their English does not really fit with ours, and I have to struggle to understand what I'm reading. The material itself is difficult, and if you're having problems, it's understandable. Despite the fact that the subtlest natural forces have been studied for thousands of years, it can be proved that a modern era began in 1844. In 1844, Baron Karl von Reichenbach from Stuttgart published a series of letters describing his research of ether, which was called OD by him. Reichenbach discovered that a part of all people can visually feel outflow from tops of crystals and magnets if they had been first properly located in full darkness. He called such people sensitives. Well, I'd like to undergo that experiment. Put some magnets in a room and let me put my hand over where they might be. Let me see if I can tell where they are. As I recall, when I'm near a magnet, I do get some sensation like they're talking about here. I don't know what benefit there is in being a sensitive. But it is a fascinating experiment that Reichenbach did in 1844 or prior to 1844. Sometime later, Reichenbach decided that ether can permeate through materials like silk, glass, and metal. According to his ideas, ether seems to permeate all things in different density. Large quantities of ether could be found in sunlight and candle flame. Well, I don't know what they're talking about there. On the edge of the century, at the turn of the century, an Austrian philosopher, Rudolf Steiner, with clairvoyance talent, researched an invisible world of etheric forces. Ooh, did he cross over into another dimension? His close partner and biographer, Gunther Wachsmith, continued this work after Steiner's death and published a masterwork of his teaching called Etheric Shaping Forces in Space, Earth, and Man. Never heard of these guys. A first true engineer of etheric forces was Wilhelm Reich, who discovered, as he called it, an orgone energy in 1939. Almost 100 years later, like Reichenbach, Reich discovered metals that are able to conduct ether 100 years ago. His real big achievement, however, was an understanding of the fact that organic materials have a tendency to absorb ether. Laying two kinds of materials together, Reich could produce a directed ether flow. Reich developed a first working device for collection and concentration of ether. An orgone accumulator is a box with 6 walls made of alternating layers of metal and organic material. Under controlled conditions, this device produced an inexplicable temperature increase in its internal part. This was enough for attracting attention of Albert Einstein, who met Reich in January 1941. Reich also experimented with a cloud buster, a buster for clouds dispersion, a tower-shaped device which most likely directed an ether flow through atmosphere. Possibly the biggest contribution to ether engineering technologies was made by Trevor James Constable. He was a follower of Steiner, Reich, and others. He spent more than 40 years improving use of the ether technology of weather control. He discovered that some geometrical forms possibly show a big ether echo. During many years, he developed his methods so that a device with the size of a coffee mug, located accordingly far from an ocean ship, could change weather condition over a distance of many miles around it. Constable discovery of resonance etheric structures was important for research of the new energy. Now a simple geometrical device can direct a concentrated beam of etheric forces through any type of a device with high accuracy. Actually, a degree of ether concentration is so high that human organs of senses can directly feel its resultant pressure. Thanks to the pioneer works of the above-mentioned scientists, it is possible to describe a design of 2 resonance ether devices which were called Chi pencils by the author. Both devices are built around a central resonance cavity. A formula for calculation of the resonance cavity's size was obtained from a research of a ballistics expert, Gerald Bull from Philadelphia. An emitting device is generally a cylindrical metal cavity with no metal external layer. Due to boundary effects discovered by Reich, ether is absorbed from space through a side surface and emitted through both sides. Actually, it is like a laser. Geometrical energy fields around the emitting device are shown in Figure 11. How to build the emitting device. The following things are necessary. A piece of a 5/32 inch copper pipe, a 1/8 inches soft cotton cord, a metal knife for the pipe, a meter stick, a sharp knife, and glue. Cut a piece of the copper pipe with a length of 18.1 centimeters. Apply a small bead of hot glue to the external part of one end and fix the cotton cord there. Wind 2 centimeters, apply a bead of hot glue, and wind the cord around the entire pipe. Cut excess of the cord. A vacuum device is made the other way. We need a non-metal cylindrical cavity with a metal external layer. Ether is drawn into one end and dispersed through the sides. A geometrical energy field around the vacuum device is shown on Figure 12. How to build the vacuum device. The following things are necessary. A piece of vinyl hose with a diameter of 5/32 inches. A piece of copper pipe with a diameter 5/16 inches. A metal knife for the hose and the pipe. A meter stick, a sharp knife, and electrical insulation tape. Cut a piece of the copper wipe with a length of 18.1 centimeters. Wind the electrical insulation tape around the vinyl hose, in some places in such a way that it would go closely into the copper pipe. Push the vinyl hose into the copper pipe until its end appears. Cut the excess of the vinyl hose. The noted streams of ether forces generated by above described different resonance devices allow defying their discovery by standard instruments. It is not surprising that, as many people think ether is live energy, while standard instruments are, of course, dead. However, discovery of ether forces by a living organism such as a human being is known. Editor's note: we hope that publication of the given materials will cause interest of experimenters who will try to examine these effects. Creating ether streams, changing ether density, it is possible to produce not only force effects, that is, motion, due to the fact that matter elements are processes in ether, vortex processes. Ether parameters influence speed of existence of any matter. It was confirmed in the experiments which were carried out by our company with V.A. Chernobrov. It is obvious that gravity and time, speed, are mutually connected effects. Due to this, creation of such devices defies not only Earth's gravity, but also time. We would appreciate offers from organizations which could invest into development of these technologies. A.V. Frolov, General Director of Faraday Lab Limited Company. This is the last card. In figures from Grebennikov's book, My World, effects of repulsion of recently cut plant stems, Figure 15, and a bunch of pipes, Figure 13 and Figure 14, are shown. These are simple and convincing experiments during which the effect of repulsion is manifested.